Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give it a minute to let people join, and then we will get started. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle, and I will be moderating today's session on behalf of the UKPA. So massive thank you, UKPA, for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. UKREiiF is one of those events where you have loads of conversations and you leave feeling really, really inspired, but it's often quite difficult to take that inspiration and then turn it into action. So this webinar is our attempt to keep up that momentum and revisit some of those key themes that came out of UKREiiF. Data, AI, smart buildings, sustainability, these are not new topics, but they are converging. And there's a pressure on the industry to move from that ambitious phase into action. And that felt really, really different this year as well. So we have brought together a brilliant panel of people who were there in the room across the wonderful program that the UKPA put on to kind of dive into some of those subjects in a little bit more detail and see how we can really keep that momentum going and take some more action. So before I introduce the speakers, I'm just going to say quickly that we will be taking questions. So if you've got anything that you want to pop into the chat, we will leave time at the end to answer. And if any of them are kind of related to some of the questions as we go, I'll be very happy to answer those. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our exceptional panel. Alex, may I start with you?
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Bales. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Lloyds Living. For those of you that aren't familiar with Lloyds, so we are part of the Lloyds Banking Group, and we are Lloyds Residential Asset Management Investment Fund Managers. So we buy predominantly single-family homes, rent them out through the standard PRS model, and we're also very early days launching our affordable shared ownership housing model too within our business. We've been trading for nearly 4 years, now at a pretty significant scale, over 3 billion AUM, and forecast growth over the next 2 to 3 years take us closer to 7 billion. So a very exciting place to be in the resi investment space in the UK.
Awesome. Glad to have you. Matthew, could we hear a bit about you?
Hello, I'm Dr. Matthew Melson, Managing Director for Technology Consulting at JLL. And yeah, the team and I support our clients looking at all things technology in the built environment. That could be from working out some strategies of what to invest in, where to go next, how to clean up a mess you may have inadvertently built, how to plug in some of the PropTech or software that you've bought, or even running it on your behalf. Thank you for having me today.
Brilliant. Thank you. Nella, over to you.
Good morning. I'm Managing Director of From UKREiiF, a chartered commercial property surveyor operating across the whole of the UK, ex-JLL as well. I basically sit on the RSCS commercial property panel where we feed in terms of regulation. So I'm also one of the authors of the global standards of responsible use of AI, but predominantly supporting occupiers with their growth across the UK, and then also supporting landlords with repositioning of assets.
Awesome. Thanks, Nella. That's really fascinating. I can't wait to dig into the responsible use of AI later on. Damon, over to you from across the pond.
Yeah, Damon Kachicha. I am based in the United States and I am on Airbnb, Airbnb's for real estate team. So what we do is we partner with developers, owners, and managers of real estate through a program called Airbnb Friendly, which ultimately enables hosting, but for properties to benefit from that hosting and be better connected and have better visibility into that hosting activity. It's great to be here today. I'll pass it back to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Damon. Appreciate you got up probably quite early for this. Brett, over to you from out of space.
Yeah, coming from Manchester today. Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for the invite here. Brett Smith, I work for a company called Siemens. I'm the head of digital and software there. And we're effectively supporting our customers and partners on all things digitalization. That could be a journey to net zero, could be a journey to making the buildings more energy efficient, operationally efficient, just better spaces for humans to occupy as well. So yeah, happy to be here.
All right, thanks everyone. Gosh, UKREiiF already does feel like it was a while ago, but it was only a couple of months back. But if we were to look back on UKREiiF, what were the conversations that stood out the most this year, looking at data, AI, smart buildings, and sustainability? Alex, I'm going to pick on you first for this one.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I think I found it really heartening. So, having had a background in first half of my career in resident technology and residential, and then second half in kind of commercial and investment management, and now back into the largest residential investment manager, I was really thrilled to see a focus on data strategies, and that was being driven by the ambition on AI. So, obviously, everyone's always talking about AI. That has been that's been the way for a couple of years now, but the fact that there's a maturity that's starting to be embraced where organizations are recognizing that actually you need to have a very robust and well-structured underlying data platform to fully leverage the capabilities of AI. And I saw the conversation get a bit more sophisticated around that, which was good news for me because that's a drum that I've been banging for a long time. And that tied in nicely into sustainability and smart buildings insofar as the commercial space, I think, has led on smart buildings and taking data out of your buildings and allowing you to operate them more effectively and improve yields and improve tenant satisfaction, all those good things. And I'm now starting to see that adoption land within the residential sector. Clearly, there's an opportunity, or there has been an opportunity within multifamily for that to be the case. They're far more close to a kind of normal commercial office building, for example. But I think in single family homes, we're starting to see that a lot more now, especially with the advent of more sophisticated heating platforms, air source platforms in particular, where the sensor data exports from those platforms, both in terms of the energy consumption, the behaviors within the home themselves and within individual rooms, is now starting to become a bit more exciting, a bit more mature. And obviously that leads then into your underlying strategic data platforms and then using AI to leverage and analyze the data and change behaviors or change investments, etc. So I thought all of that was starting to become far more robust and far more sophisticated, and it's being driven by AI indirectly, but the outcomes are fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Damon, how about yourself? What were the themes that, from your perspective, that you were seeing?
Yeah, what was interesting in the conversations I have, and again, primarily on the residential side, and probably more of the outcome of all of the data was around the viability for a lot of these projects, whether it's BTR, student, or co-living. I think another big question that I heard often was demand for these types of products and how do we get demand? And I think part of the challenge that we're seeing across the US and in the UK is affordability. So how do we drive actual adoption of these products that we're building? And again, the outcome of a lot of this data. So what we've been working on is trying to drive more of that affordability through this idea of allowing a resident to sort of part-time host, so that you can make your properties more attractive. And that's been very well received across the US and the UK, and obviously still a little bit newer in the UK. But I think those were the two themes that I heard the most in the conversations I was having on the residential side as an outcome of analyzing data.
Brilliant. Matthew, I'm going to pass it to you now.
Yeah, night and day, actually. If I think about the first time that I went to UKREiiF 3 years previously, it was almost a bit quaint that someone there was talking about technology. And whereas this time, I don't know, is it too bold to say perhaps it was a little bit of a focus? Certainly from the conversations we were having in the JLL tent, it was almost like there was a real like fear of missing out. It felt like the sort of tech FOMO conference, perhaps even I would go as far to say like a thirst to learn about what everybody was doing, particularly around artificial intelligence, what was working, what was a huge flop. And then it was almost as if you kind of then had the downstream activities once you wanted to get a little bit more into it around data, smart buildings, and sustainability. But the fact that tech was so far up the agenda of what you would consider to be like a conference about physical stuff was really impressive.
I like that. AI FOMO seemed to be the theme this year. Nella, I feel like you'd have a lot to say on that as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Matthew. I certainly felt that previous conversation was about what could AI do, but around UKREiiF, it was very much about how do we deploy it. But the interesting thing, Michelle, was that because I was part of the global standards rollout with the responsible use of AI, it was one of my questions that I wanted to try and see how many people were actually following the standards. And again, so many panel discussions were talking about AI, but not a lot of them were talking about the governance and the responsibility of deploying it. So I think there's going to be a clear shift from having technology for the sake of having technology. Every conversation had to come back about what is the outcomes, how do we improve the operational performance, reducing carbon, and creating occupational experiences. So a lot of the kind of prop tech suppliers and people that I spoke to, it was kind of, they weren't really aware of the regulations that were coming out. So certainly my feedback to RCS was about, well, how do we engage widely and make sure that we are actually safeguarding the rest of the industry, because there's some huge risk around it. And I know that we will cover this, but ultimately people recognize that AI isn't the magic solution. And then we need to start thinking, or actually we're talking about sustainability, but what are the risks around it? So that was kind of my key takeaway from UKREiiF, as much as the positive bits.
Yeah, I mean, I think raising awareness on standards that we should all be striving to is super important, and hopefully that will be well received on this webinar. Brett, it was your first UKREiiF, I think. So I'd love to hear what your key takeaways were and the themes that stood out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was my first time going to UKREiiF. Siemens has been there in other years as well, but AI FOMO from Matthew, I love that expression. It very much did feel, if I'm being honest, I don't have much basis to what it was like the years prior, but it did feel like an AI conference based on all the conversations that were going on the panels around customers, in all of the tents and other speaker slots as well. So it very much felt, I left feeling very optimistic, and I felt that even from the customers and the delegates that were there, there was a big optimism around AI. It wasn't so much considered a more of an unknown, scary topic to kind of delve into. And I think what's driving that, I've definitely noticed this in my experience, not only globally, but also within the UK and I in the markets that we serve, that there's a general market maturity that we're seeing. So we're very much kind of moving away from, pilots being done more into mass production. And I think customers and partners, they've tried it, they've tested it, and they're starting to see some really good, valuable outcomes that can support their businesses as well, which I think is then driving that confidence really in the way that we're heading. So it's moving from like a nice to have kind of realm. I've been talking smart buildings for almost 10 years. And some of the early years, it was always kind of, it felt like it moved into that nice to have bracket. But now I feel it's like kind of getting into the stage of that must have and really integrating into our business outcomes and processes. So left feeling really optimistic. Met some of the panel that we got here today there as well. So great to connect with everyone again. And look forward to next year as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to pick up on that last point that you just said around, you think we're kind of coming out of pilots and going more into action. Alex, you had said you're really excited about the focus on data strategy, and a lot of that is being kind of pushed by AI. Maybe I'll go to you first on this, but where are we actually seeing progress versus still kind of talking about it?
Yeah, I think that progress versus ambition question was very interesting in that 2 or 3 years ago, I think the ambition wasn't universal. I think some investors and some operators were very happy to continue with the level of insight that they had, and there was a feeling that experience and anecdotal stuff was just as valid as data-backed decision making. I think that's materially changed. I think the ambition was almost universal now. Everyone I spoke to definitely recognized the value, and again, I think it's driven by AI, and now they're having those robust conversations and understanding they need to address the data layer underneath it. In terms of, so that's a great thing, right? That's the demand is definitely there, and I think the understanding of the value and the value generation is definitely there. I think The progress is sporadic and it's not uniform. The devil's in the detail with all this stuff. You need to have core line of business applications, operating platforms that support the ingestion of the data and allow you to analyze it within the right context of your operating business. And different vendors have different levels of capability and maturity in that regard. I was seeing some of those that have got more sophisticated operating platforms doing it within their line of business application, which is great because you've got all the right context, the users are there, the source data flowing into it is in the right place, and that works very well for them. Some of them put those solutions together in slightly Heath Robinson, but slightly restricted by the capabilities of their platform and need to kind of bolt stuff together in a loose way. Others had the approach of abstracting that data layer outside of their operating platforms and reporting on it independently. I think that's a strategy that works for some of the large incumbent operating platform providers, where the integration and the extensibility of the data layer can be a challenge. And then there are definitely pockets of people who are using next generation operating platforms who are able to extend their data models and ingest this data at the right place and leverage AI immediately in that platform as well. So I think the ambition bit is now sorted. I think we've got that good coverage on that. I think the progress bit is sporadic, but it's all going in the right direction. And there's a number of different approaches to get to that end destination. And I see all of them being executed.
Awesome. And Matthew, I'm going to pass that question to you, that ambition versus what's actually kind of being delivered, or is it still just that ambitions outweighing delivery?
Oh no, I think delivery is happening, and I think we've got some evidence. Every year we run a technology survey across our heads of real estate for JLL's occupier clients, and then some leaders at investor type organizations, and we ask them a consistent question every year to track how behavior is changing. And we found that in 2023, 5% of those organizations reported that they were piloting AI of some kind. But when we asked them the same question in 2025, that had jumped all the way up to 92%. We then went further to try to kind of understand, well, what is that? And what we'd learned from it is that they'd achieved a lot of stuff kind of, I want to put in inverted commas, for free by going for trying to deliver on some of their ambitions. They'd found that they were able to, for those who thought they'd been successful in it at least, thought they had successfully been able to clear some tech debt and had consolidated some of the stack that they had, and that they'd put in very robust bits of data governance. And that was almost more important to them than any form of kind of new insight, of which there were some. So I think it is great to see that it's been a real wake-up call for folks to get on with it and get a lot of the basics that we've probably been complaining about in the industry for a long time done and dusted.
Thank you so much. And Brett, you've got the sort of perspective on, hardware and software. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the we don't do pilots comment from earlier, or we're doing less of them at least.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we think how long Siemens has been in this space for, particularly with one of the digital building platforms that we have, which has been out for over 6 years, connected to 100,000 buildings worldwide, and it's getting very good adoption in certain verticals, so around commercial buildings, pharma, life sciences, higher education such as universities, and more recently healthcare as well, which I always think is a great marker to many extents in terms of the adoption of technology like this, because typically, not all the time, but healthcare can be slower to adopt newer technology, but they're on the journey with us already. And I think it goes down to what people are seeing in the results. So where we've worked with customers, we're obviously working with them to understand how they're using it, the value that they're getting back from it, so that we really kind of work on that tangible ROI. So what clients are getting back for this. So typically where we are connecting buildings and using the technologies that we've got and that are available in the market, it can do up to around 30% energy savings, an increase in 10% in terms of net operating income, and obviously giving you 24 access to the data as well. And I'm always looking for customer stories in terms of how they're using that, kind of focusing on that, the progress section that we've got. So I'll give you kind of just an example on how clients are seeing some of the value and the outcomes that we're getting. So one was actually with a university, and we've got something which does anomaly detection, which is a very well-known AI use case across the market. And effectively, it was looking at, identified that there was a much larger intake of water, or a bigger consumption of water on this particular example. And what was actually happening was that there was an underground water leak. So it wasn't detected by the human eye because it was underground, subterranean. The client in this particular matter, they were quite new to the technology. They ignored the anomaly detection that was going on until they got the bill at the end of the month, which is quite substantial. So it just kind of proves the point that this is how customers are starting to use these types of platforms to be, the eyes across on the ground, but below the ground in this particular analogy, to kind of make the invisible visible. So you are seeing a lot of that. We're getting lots of interesting customer stories as well. I think on the ambition side, it's always good to start small, I would say. We get a lot of requests from clients that really want to do everything all at once in day one. I would always be in favor of doing quite a pragmatic step-by-step approach and getting to that. We can absolutely achieve that, and the market can achieve that, but I think we need to just take that step-by-step approach to getting there, to kind of de-risk the delivery side of it, and for people to get to lose momentum on projects as well. It's good to get some quick wins under the belt and then move on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think quick wins all the way, and then see where we can get to. Nella, same question over to you. Where are you seeing that sort of ambition versus delivery sitting?
So I think undoubtedly we've made progress. I still think there are two camps: people that are deploying AI technology, PropTech, to kind of give them that data, but there are also people that are just too afraid to even touch it, because they don't know what the cost implications are, the risk around it. And I think most organisations today have far more operational data than they did 5 years ago, because quite a few of our clients we're installing sensors, everything's on the cloud platforms, there's more of a connected building system. But the problem is that we get so many of these different reports, but no one's actually digesting what does it actually mean. So I think it's all great that we can collect all of this data, but it isn't necessarily creating the value just yet, because this is where the ambition slightly outweighs the delivery, is because they're not really joining them all together. So, for example, we run portfolios across the UK. One of our clients, they are downsizing, or they're trying to optimize their portfolio with their real estate. And so within our own CRM system, we're able to track, okay, when is the rent review? When is the break options? Lay that on top of the pre-planned maintenance of the upkeeps, and then lay that on top of what is the dilapidations liability. If you're able to take all of those sort of numbers, you can then actually give more strategic advice. And this is where the opportunity comes from. And the other thing is, like, one of our landlords, another university, they are coming up with a building because they're not getting the right amount of numbers in terms of education. So we're trying to reposition a 70,000 square foot building. But again, we're not going to be able to let it in one go. So we've got to look at the data resources to see how can we phase this building, how can we reduce the running costs without actually shutting it completely down. And again, this is where PropTech has the ability to kind of show us and give us that data to make much more executive decisions on that. So I think technology is moving incredibly quickly, but the organisation change and skills and governance, as I mentioned, inevitably is very slow. So I think that's the biggest challenge, because even as at UKREiiF, we're deploying quite a lot of tech and looking at ways that we can be much more efficient, so that I'm not bogged down with the administration and I can actually be more of an advisory service to our clients. But we've got people within our team that actually don't necessarily want to have full transparency for whatever reason. And bigger organizations that have more of that data, so understanding, okay, who's talking to who, what platforms are interconnected. So there's definitely going to be a culture shift as well that we need to kind of get a handle on. How do we bring other people along with that journey?
There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to come back to this. But first, Damon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that sort of ambition versus delivery piece and what you're seeing from the Airbnb perspective on how you're getting adoption.
Yeah, these things take time, and Brett had mentioned smart buildings and the maturity of smart buildings. If you think about what specifically we work on within the Airbnb for real estate team, a lot, I would call it progress, because a lot of what we've been unlocked for our partners and their willingness to now allow their residents to host on a part-time basis, excuse me, would not have been possible without the maturity of smart buildings. So think access control and connectivity. How are people getting in and out of my property? So I'm really a practical application of what we've been working on, of actually a return on an investment of building a smart building and building it in a way that's more connected, that opens up use cases that can drive real value. And from an owner perspective, I mean, we've driven over 4 million in revenue to the folks that partner with us. Their residents have made 13 million annually. So offsetting some significant amount of rent in those cases and driving affordability. So I would say progress. I think some of these other areas we're probably still in ambition mode, but I'm optimistic that we will see those things turn into more practical applications as they mature, like we're seeing in smart buildings.
I think that's such a brilliant perspective, just talking about even like from the resident, how they're able to reduce their own costs by some of the technology that you're able to deploy. No, that's fascinating. Thank you, Damon. I'm going to come back to you, Nella, on just what we were speaking about around data and decision making. So you articulated it beautifully. Like there is so much information, there's so much data that we can get. But what is actually holding us back? Because you know, on one hand, you can pull all of this data and make those sophisticated insights, like you've said, which allow you to move faster and decarbonize and understand what's happening at building level. But are we also just adding more complexity and creating potentially more sophisticated data silos? Because we love a data silo in this industry, and I'd love to just unpack that a bit more.
That's certainly you make more money, right? Having the silos. But I think we're somewhere in the middle. We absolutely have more data than ever before. Again, everything is at the tip of your hands. And I think for businesses that are growing or an SME, this is where there is a real opportunity you're having on an even playing field, because there are resources out there and it's moving so quickly. In terms of the actual standards that came out, the consultation came out in September last year, and it came into full effect in March of this year. So effectively, my company's had 6 months jump on it to kind of update our existing systems, track where what AI technology, PropTech systems that we're using, and understand what is the risk. Like, for example, we're based in the UK. Where does that data sit? Is it in the UK? We had to amend our PI insurance. We've updated our terms of engagement with our clients, notifying our employees to go on to regular training. So I've done quite a few of these panel discussions when actually there are quite a few people, whether they're at the end of their careers and they're saying, I'm so pleased that I'm at the end of my career, I don't need to worry about this. And then you've got some of the juniors that some of these companies don't have a policy in place, and they're using ChatGPT under the desk. This is where the real risk is. And I think once people get to understand the benefits of how AI can actually transform a business or a technology, I think that's where there is going to be a real shift to kind of move away from those silos. Our CRM system, for example, can give us an AI analytics of when was the last time we spoke to a client, what was the certain task. It can then create a workflow for the whole team. So if there are individuals that are over-resourced, it can redistribute it. But again, it doesn't have to be done automatically. It's just making sure that a human person is actually understanding what tasks are being generated from it. So that only really happens if systems can really work together. And because we're seeing some amazing technologies operating in isolation. And again, when I was at UKREiiF, couple of the questions that I did ask some of these PropTech providers is, okay, you're tapping into the BMS system of a building, whether you're tracking energy management, optimization, or maintenance, where is that data sitting? Okay, who is your parent company? Are they based in the UK? Do they have the same jurisdictions that we have to abide to? How is your software actually going to support the surveying industry to fulfill their criteria to remain compliant? And then if you don't challenge your PropTech supplier, then you don't know where that data is going. Are they selling that data on? So for me, it's actually asking those much more intelligent questions, because there are hallucinations within AI, and there is quite a lot of confidence that it spits out something and you think, oh, it's 100% correct. But this is why the expertise needs to be in place to actually verify actually there is an error there. So I think, yeah, it's about creating trust, connecting information, which we can then support the business owners or decision makers to make faster decisions.
Yeah, that education piece is so important. Just obviously getting the message across, like what are the questions you should be asking, understanding around data sovereignty. Brett, I'd love to throw this to you now. Obviously, as someone who's been, dealing with the hardware and the software and trying to answer these questions for clients. What's your take on if we're creating actually intelligent assets or sophisticated silos?
Yeah, this was I think a big topic as well that we were speaking about at UKREiiF was the challenge around, one of the challenges around that we need to overcome around the connectivity. So I'll try and give some practical steps around that and try to get that across on the panels as well. So when we're working with clients, I'll give one particular example. It's a large commercial real estate customer. They've got offices all across Europe. Also industry, retail, and hotels. A really, really cool customer. So within that, you can imagine not only geographies, but different verticals, different types of buildings, different sizes of buildings. The connectivity piece was, a task that we needed to get right early, particularly as we got 350 buildings to connect as part of that. So part of that answer is within not necessarily some of the boring stuff, but just really understanding exactly what they've got on site. So it could be the realms of an audit or a survey. You'd be surprised what those audits and surveys come back with, because sometimes it can be different to what the client expects that they've already got on site. Maybe they've inherited some sites that are completely different. We are well aware that customers will have a complete Frankenstein of connectivity devices or BMS systems. They could have a Siemens BMS, they could have other third parties as well. So what we've tried to do is to enable these AI-enabled platforms. The connectivity piece is very important. So what we've done is to ensure that buildings can connect that already have Siemens subsystems, third-party systems, but also where they don't have any connectivity, or maybe they don't have any building management system. Maybe the building's quite small or it didn't warrant the investment for a BMS. So trying to ensure that these platforms can connect to buildings of any size, any vertical, any connectivity was one that we really wanted to do when we went down this journey. So that is a really good customer example. It's also one of the first ones I did 5-6 years ago, so I can still remember what we had to go through there. One other thing is just around that step-by-step that I was talking about earlier. I think I gave the analogy, I think the London Marathon was on a couple of weeks prior, so it's kind of running was in my mind. If you're setting up to do a marathon, you're probably going to look to do maybe a 5K or maybe a 1K, then a 5K, then a 10K, then a full-fledged marathon. It's unlikely you're going to go for to run a marathon day one. And if you do, you're very brave. And it might be quite painful. So to avoid some of the shortcomings, maybe I would definitely recommend that step-by-step approach. So the audits, the surveys, really understanding what you've currently got, how we can solve that before switching it on. And the other side would be not the technology side, but one other point, just on the people side. So having really clear outcomes that you're wanting to get from this type of technology as well. Try and make it as specific as you can. It could be we want to reduce energy 20%, and how are we going to do that leveraging this type of technology as well? So having those really clear outcomes, not being too broad with it either. Just try and be really focused, and then link it to an ROI, and then you can prove that it works, and then scale from there. Some practical examples of what I've experienced.
Thanks, Brett. I appreciate that. The walk before you can run, and yeah, the small goals will add up to something much bigger. Alex, I'm going to go to you on this, and I actually sat through a panel that you did literally on this entire subject, so I'm keen to hear what you've got to say on our sophisticated silos versus connected intelligent buildings.
I'll try and remember what I said last time and then trip myself up. I think kind of building on Brett's point, I think sophisticated silos are not necessarily an evil here, and the reason behind that is I see them as a stepping stone to the wider integrated insight. So I'll give you a case in point, right? We from defects and faults perspective will track the performance of particular boiler manufacturers and models across our portfolio, right? And we may see, I think what I was talking about when at UKREiiF was around our gas replacement air source capex project, but on the gas boiler front, for example, we'll be tracking the performance of those particular models. We'll see issues with particular manufacturers start to emerge because of the scale of the portfolio, and within that silo of that data landing in the independent defects and faults tracking platform, that's still useful, right? We can, off the back of that, do some proactive maintenance. We can go out and replace them before they expire, so we prevent any future failures and disruptions to the tenant. So that's some useful insight from the silo. However, as yields tighten and we need to look at our capex plans and the kind of wider portfolio piece, being able to integrate that data, that silo into the rest of the smorgasbord of data platforms that we have. So we start to get insight around, are we seeing issues with that manufacturer and that model number only within a particular developer or within a particular subcontractor or particular geography? That then gives you far more insight for your future investments, right? Because you may choose to encourage particular developers not fit that manufacturer because we've seen issues with the subcontractors they use not being able to do them effectively, or something like that, right? And I think that's where there's value definitely to be had within this sophisticated silo. So I wouldn't want to kind of poo-poo, because that's a far more easy approach for a business, right? You're getting a particular flavor of data from a particular vendor, and you can load it into an independent platform. Great, there's definitely insight and value to be created through that. To go to the next level, and I think there is ambition to do this, and I've definitely got a sense at UKREiiF from some conversations I had that a lot of investors and operators were wanting to go down this more cohesive, broader perspective. But that's where you need to break out of the silo and have that integration to be able to leverage the data knowledge within there, but across the rest of the board, and allow you to make better decisions, properly data backed and insight across the rest of your world. So I think for me, that's the key. The silo is not necessarily a bad thing, but don't let that be the end of your journey, right? There's far greater value to be had when you start to bake them into the rest of your platform.
Awesome. And Matthew, you must see this from all angles through JLL. Love to hear your take on this too.
Well, I used to be quite sort of cynical and grumpy about it, to the point that I would sort of say data everywhere, but not a drop to drink, because every building was different. The way that people had structured stuff or labeled it just meant that you were dealing with a mad box of frogs every time, and you couldn't get anything to work. So we, as an industry, came up with a bunch of ontologies, particularly in the smart space, which kind of helped if you had a new build to work on, but it didn't really fix for all of the existing buildings that are out there anymore. And it was basically, I think, lived in a too difficult box for quite a long time. But the pace at which I'm seeing some models like being built, I think inference will be the way going forward. Like knowing the sort of number that you've got and how that relates to other bits of data, and it means that maybe we don't, famous last words, don't have to worry about data governance in the future, because systems will be so unbelievably smart that they will be able to work out what it is that it's looking at, how it should compare and contrast, perhaps even benchmark. Maybe now is the right time to flip from grumpy to optimist for built environment data. I don't know. Only time will tell, right?
Well, I'm looking forward to the day when everyone can just continue to use their Excel sheets and the data will just, yeah, take care of itself. We'll be in a much better position as an industry. Damon, I'd love to hear what your take on this is as well.
Yeah, another practical example of sort of it working well, I guess. We definitely hear on the other side of it, we definitely hear from partners, especially in the US, of, we're looking at point solutions that don't integrate with our larger, and they're trying to hold all the data in. So I do see that as, we see that as a challenge, but what we've seen that's really interesting, through the lens of this program that we have, is as residents are hosting, historically you wouldn't know when a guest was on site if you were running a property. Today you can now leverage data to understand, hey, I have a guest on site. Maybe that person's actually looking for their next place to live. And how do I make sure that experience is really a great experience for them? So I think that's a practical example of where somebody might be trying before they actually decide to lease or buy something. And historically, it would have been really difficult to figure out why that person or who that person was. Today, that's more connected. So just maybe a practical, positive example of when these things work, the value that can get unlocked.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to switch the conversation over to one of the other themes. I mean, AI was all encompassing, but what else had kind of stood out was sustainability and responsibility. And using AI alongside sustainability and responsibility is actually quite interesting. But as AI is becoming more embedded across the built environment, how are organizations balancing that innovation with the governance and the fact that sustainability is a real concern when you think about kind of the compute power of AI? Matthew, I'd love to just come back to you on this. I know when we had our prep call, you had a few things to say on this.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's so I don't know where the balance sits. So I know that like sort of most of the energy that you burn is in the like training of the models more than the usage of it. So it's kind of a sunk cost. But if I put it in the context of like the built environment, and if I think about HVAC analytics as the first example, for most commercial buildings, they might have an energy usage intensity of about 130 kilowatt hours per metered square. And really, the best in class design gets it down to 110. But at least for the London grid, if you want to be net zero, then you have to be operating at about 55 kilowatt hours per meter squares, which practically means that bring some candles because we won't be turning the lights on. If it's the winter, maybe bring a blanket because the heating certainly isn't going on. And if you work on a device, you should bring it pre-charged because use of the plug sockets is banned, which doesn't really fix the problem. It just moves it to somewhere else. And given that like dilemma that commercial buildings are facing, and knowing that a AI system that looks at what your HVAC is doing can take 20% off, maybe it's a good thing. And given a lot of those models are already built, it's a sunk cost. Perhaps the balance has now shifted to a place where you are silly not to. And I mean, well, thank goodness climate change isn't real. We've not seen any evidence in the past week or so. Maybe now's the time.
Yeah, absolutely. There was, I think, an article in the FT this morning that in the US, it's about 25% more electricity is being forecasted to be used by 2030. So I don't know what that is in the UK. There's also a question in the chat saying, how can the industry balance to drive for smarter, more data-intensive buildings with the need to reduce energy consumption and meet net zero targets? Brett, I'm going to go to you now. You actually had mentioned 30% energy savings as some of the things that you've seen with what you've been able to do with Siemens. But yeah, keen to get your perspective on sort of AI sustainability and responsibility.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic, and it's one that always gets a lot of debate. Any of the panels and the speaker sessions that I've been on, as well. And I think as a supplier, it's obviously very important we take the responsibilities in terms of how we do that in terms of the governance side. Siemens has made an investment of around 1 billion euros over the next 3 years into AI alone. And we always make sure that our platforms that we're using are cyber secure end to end. So for those that are in the cyber world in terms of governance, we've got white papers there. There's something called ISO 27001, 27017. The list goes on. So as a supplier, as a vendor of smart building technology or AI enabled technology, we really take that seriously. So we ensure that we've got all the certificates, we're cyber checked and audited very regularly around that space as well. In terms of leveraging and using AI, I mean, if we think about fault detection and diagnostics, which has been around for a while, so it identifies that there's been an issue with an asset, could be an air handling unit or a heat pump. And ideally, it's going to be working out, trying to effectively work out why something's failed, how they can fix it, a cost association, so that that organization can take an intervention sooner before it costs more money in terms of natural resources, but also financial resources as well. But at the end of that, there's always a human at the end of that needs to take some kind of action as well. I think Nella was talking about this earlier, just on the people, the human side, in terms of inspiring the sort of the next generations of that. So you probably see a lot of job titles out in the market that have some form of data or digital or AI function to that as well. We've got digital sales apprentices as well, some of which are in my team as well, and just the general excitement that they've got around this particular topic as well. So just as an organization, we're obviously investing in the future and our people as well. But it's a hard topic, I understand, to kind of get that balance. We're always looking to understand how we can make AI serve humanity and not the other way around.
Nella, I'd love to come to you next on this and just hear a little bit more about some of the governance side of things.
Yeah, it's such a big topic, isn't it? And it touches so many different parts of the built environment. I think the conversation is so much bigger than just AI. Organizations are just trying to balance innovation against a backdrop of the geopolitical climate that we're facing. Like electricity, not enough electricity in the grid is the bane of my life at the moment, where we're doing acquisitions of industrial units. And a lot of the investors that are building new industrial sites are basically phasing out gas availability. But there's not enough electricity to actually allow to run some of these machinery equipments for our clients. So we're really going in and trying to understand a lot about the operational needs of the business, and understanding actually some of these machineries have been operational for like 20 years. Is there actually another product out there? We've got one that is a car repair for insurance companies. Their insurers are demanding more visibility on their sustainability. And one of those questions, which is very simple, because we're doing the procurement of all of the equipment within these new facilities, is that we realize, we've changed the paint supplier. And the paint supplier, what that means is that you can now bake a car or spray paint a car at 21 degrees as opposed to 30. But they've had it in for a couple of years, but then no one had actually challenged them to say, actually, you can now reduce the spray booth temperature. It doesn't have to run for as long. So there's more and more different technologies are coming in, and it's then just asking the question where people just think, it doesn't really relate to real estate. That's an operation point of view, but ultimately it's a ripple effect. And when Brett's mentioned a couple of times about the people, like all of this is about how do we create an environment for the people? Like who is the end user using different types of products, whether it's commercial, residential, industrial, office, retail, for example. So I think going forward in terms of that governance, the standards itself acts like a checklist. It doesn't have all of the answers. again, like I said, it came out to effect in March of this year. And since then, we're moving really quickly. And it's just making sure that we have got the sense checks in place. And just to make sure that if you are deploying certain PropTech resources, that we make sure that we're asking those right questions. Because again, in terms of the operations and the opportunity, like for me, from the amount of times that I've had the big corporates of the property managers, that they are under pressure to demonstrate improvements in energy efficiencies, whether that's water consumption, waste management, they are going to occupiers and asking for that data. So tenants who are not about real estate, they are only concerned about what is my bottom line, what is my energy consumption. They're just thinking, I just need to know what is my total occupational costs. And now you're telling me that I got to give you all of this data. So who actually pays for that data? Who actually pays for the installation of all of these sensors, these trackings within a building? So there is a question about, again, if you are giving that data to the landlord, what is the data, who's the data controller, and all of these things. We're working with Trust Tech, who do like an audit. So when we're taking on new buildings, we're going through that audit process so that our clients can actually understand what are the assets that they are currently in situ, whether the data they are collecting actually can be trusted, and what are the data in terms of our own corporate social responsibility needs, or what our investors are saying that they need from that transparency, and can we install to give everyone more comfort. And ultimately it's all about trust, and this is the thing, it's moving so quickly that it's quite hard to trust something when you haven't developed that relationship. But I think similar to what Matt was saying earlier, that we've moved away from just experimenting, we're really deploying it, and it's just making sure that we are asking and challenging, not necessarily just challenging because there's not a challenge of the lack of data, because we've got plenty of it, but making sure that we're asking those right questions and making sure that we do the bits that we are saying we're going to do.
I think that's such an important point, that trust, that and understanding obviously where all the data is coming from. And I'm going to pass this to you, Alex, in just a second, because I think obviously coming from Lloyd's and having that, the financial institution behind you, there's going to be very different regulations. And I always think real estate can learn a lot from banking. And then I'm going to answer a couple of audience questions and put you all on the spot, just because there are a few, and I realize we're running low on time. But Alex, first, I'd love to hear your perspective on AI responsibility, sustainability, and how you approach that from where you're sitting.
Yeah, Michelle, and some really inspiring comments from some of the panelists that I'd love to build on. So the two kind of core pillars, that sustainability and then governance. So on the sustainability side, I think within a single family home portfolio, we recognize that ultimately the solution to creating net zero portfolio is decarbonation of the grid. Because fundamentally we can do what we can within the individual homes themselves, and we are doing a lot within that regard. So I think I spoke about at UKREiiF, we built a machine learning model, so not generative LLM, but an ML model to analyze locations for retrofit from gas to air source. That took on board a number of different parameters and kind of informed our CapEx plans for that. We're also partnered with Octopus to create zero bill homes. So trying to kind of get ahead of relying on the grid getting decarbonized, we can decarbonize individual homes, fitting solar PV, fitting batteries, and we commit to 10 years of no electricity bills for the tenants in those homes, which is a fantastic position to get to. Cash prohibitive to do that across the entire portfolio, but we can pick and choose the right places where we can leverage that the most effectively. So we are reliant on the government pressing ahead with their agenda on decarbonisation of the grid. That's kind of fundamental to us being able to fix that across the portfolio. On the governance side, you're absolutely right. So the bank takes a very, very serious view on the usage of AI, and we do use it extensively. We have a fantastic AI academy. Every single member of the Lloyd's business, all 90 odd thousand of us, have full access to Copilot Premium. We have We just announced a deal with Microsoft, a 5-year deal to give all of our colleagues Microsoft 365 E7 licensing with full Copilot suite. So I cannot fault the bank for its ambition in that regard, but we take a very robust approach to it. So a full model governance committee. We're very careful where we use non-deterministic models to drive decisions. Clearly, when it's people's finances or their homes at stake, a non-deterministic probabilistic model cannot guarantee the right outcome and can create risk. So we can use it to create cogen where we can audit it and there's a human in the loop to validate stuff. But in terms of direct decision making that affects people's lives, we're very careful about where we do that. We have a very, very sophisticated onboarding process. So some of the points that you were talking about, Nella, ISO 27001 forms part of that. There's always deep dives on the architecture, the systems architecture, where the data is stored, how it's protected, and we go into a lot of detail with each of our vendors and suppliers in that regard. And to that end, there are some well-known LLM models that we're not allowed to use in the bank because we can't guarantee UK data sovereignty. And that's a big issue for us. FCA regulated, PRA regulated. There are conditions imposed upon us around where our customers' data can sit and who else, in terms of which other governments can have access to it. So that can create a challenge for us. But I think all in all, the ambition is definitely there. The tooling is there. We're just doing it in a very robust and measured way. But I think the outcomes are there as well. We can demonstrate that our tenants are having a much better outcome because of some of that investment.
That's brilliant. Awesome. I'm going to ask a couple of these questions from the panelists just because we are running out of time and there's some really good ones here. So a question to all panelists. So whoever wants to jump in, please do. Are your organizations still interested in new PropTech solutions, or are you now using AI to kind of build your own solutions around these? I think that's a brilliant question for this panel. Anyone want to?
I'm happy to take that. Yeah, so definitely yes. Mainly because whilst I'd love to build everything, we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. And there are point solutions that are far more sophisticated and will get us further up the curve far quicker. So the challenge is they need to be able to integrate. Back to my point about sophisticated silos, I don't want to create point solutions that just live on their own. But absolutely, and we speak to lots of them every day and we run a number of pilots. I've only been in post for 7 or 8 months, and I think I've commissioned at least 3 different PropTechs in the time I've been here.
And then just to build on what Alex is saying there, so absolutely, Siemens, the size of the company that it is, even we're not looking to make everything ourselves. It would just take too long. So we have our own marketplace where we work with, must be close to over 1,000 ecosystem partners now, which will maybe have very niche use cases that they're serving in the market and doing that very well. So we'd effectively work with them in partnership rather than build something ourselves. So absolutely.
And is there an AI product, service, or solution that landlords and operators want the most? Maybe Matthew, even from a JLL perspective, are there things that you're seeing? Sorry to put you all on the spot, but it's a good question.
It's mostly a mixed bag. I think the initial thing that folks are looking for are some kind of automation or efficiency gains. And that is where I think when we're thinking about some of the products, I think AI has been seen to bring the SaaS apocalypse. So as long as there is some sort of defensible moat, then we'd be interested in the kind of PropTech stuff. Otherwise, I'm seeing some like lease abstraction bits and pieces that folks are interested in, HVAC analytics. There doesn't seem to be a set direction. People are picking the biggest pain point for their business and going from there.
Brilliant. And then the last question I'll ask is, how should we approach retrofit solutions, especially for energy management and smart buildings? Anyone got any thoughts on retrofit? Because I know it all works well when it's a new shiny building, but that's actually not the case for most of the UK.
I actually have a column coming out on it in Smart Buildings magazine on Wednesday. And that's got a couple of examples in. So I think you probably want to start with an audit and what you've got, the things that you know are a problem. So in it, I talk about how lift logic has gone from like expecting people to get there for 9 o'clock, and that's not the case anymore. So you waste a load of trips or make people wait longer than expected, and that's probably like a simple thing that you could do. Or maybe with experienced mobile apps, we know that access control and live meeting room or desk availability is the most important thing, and perhaps like the bonus points for the coffee in the office wasn't what folks were interested in. So I think we'll start to see a simplification of those into the most loved features as a couple of examples.
Awesome. Now, Sorry, go
Well, I
ahead,
was
Nella.
going to add in and just say the biggest mistake is starting with technology. Start with the building itself, because every building has a different history, different systems, different operational challenges. It's not one size fits all. That's my quick take on that.
Can I just add one thing, just because I wouldn't want the audience to think that this is only relevant for new buildings. It's absolutely not. Most of the customers we speak to are the ones that already have the buildings ready to go and built. So actually, most of the business within smart buildings is retrofit. So yeah, just so the audience doesn't feel it's only new build. It's absolutely not. Retrofit is the biggest part of what we do.
Well, we're just about out of time, but I would just very quickly quick fire if everyone can say one big opportunity they see in the next few years, and I will start with Matthew. One quick fire round.
It's got to be to get your skills right. We've got lots of put my teeth in. We've got lots to learn.
Cool. Alex.
Yeah, I echo that. Get skills right in your team. Leverage the tooling that we're putting in place.
Amazing. Nella. One opportunity.
The opportunity is bringing the right partners and the people. Again, it has to be about the end user and focus on that.
Brilliant. And Damon?
Nella ended where I was going to start, which is customer experience. I think that's the biggest unlock. If we can focus on the customer, that will drive more value, more utilization, and ultimately the ROI.
Awesome. And Brett?
Yeah, one of optimism. I think we're looking to solve to getting to a state where it's a very human-centric autonomous building that we're looking at, but we also need to factor in the people part that we've kind of been talking about as well around the governance as well. So we should feel very optimistic about the future in terms of where we're heading, and we can just do that in a step-by-step approach.
Well, thank you all so much for giving up your time. This was incredible. We could have kept going. Obviously, we definitely ran out of time just there, but really appreciate everyone joining, and to the wonderful panelists for sharing your insights and your lunchtime with us. And thank you, UKPA, for having me moderate. Until the next one. See you later.
Thanks, Jerome.